I see some people standing in the back. If you would like to take this opportunity to grab a seat, we do expect some other people to be coming in over the next 10 or 15 minutes with traffic. And so if you see that it's getting kind of full, maybe even scoot in and kind of close in some of those open seats if needed. I hope if you haven't already, I hope you've had an opportunity to maybe meet one new person tonight, and if you haven't, and get an opportunity even on the way out to say hello to somebody in the neighborhood you haven't met before. That's one of the benefits of us having these meetings in person. I'm going to go ahead and go over the agenda. We're going to do some short topics that are very neighborhood specific. We're going to hit on a couple things with our local parks, streets and grounds, the K-line, and some development that we're seeing in our neighborhood that's different than what we're used to. We'll have a talk on the development at the Emerson campus. We've got representatives from the Lake Washington School District here that we're happy to have to update us on that. Our main event this evening is on the Quinta Permanent Supportive Housing Facility that is set to open in July this summer. And we've got people from the City of Kirkland, King County, Plymouth Housing, and Kirkland Police Department here. We'll have a presentation, a panel discussion, and then open mic for the audience. As we transition out of that, we're going to give an update on what's going on at Houghton Village. And we've got an upcoming City Council election year. So we're going to talk about how that's shaping up. And we've got quite a few people that have filed. And we just want to start sharing that with you. And then we'll talk about upcoming dates. So I do see a few people here that I would like to recognize. I see that Council Member Neil Black has joined us this evening. Thank you for coming, Neil. Councilman John Tim Chisholm, right in the back there. Thank you for coming this evening. And I think I saw Councilman Pascal. Did I see him? Yeah. Councilman John Pascal. Thank you for coming this evening. There are other distinguished visitors here as well, but I think you're going to meet them in the course of our discussions. I want to let you know that we've got one of our neighbors, Carl Malone, who has volunteered to record our meeting this evening. So thank you, Carl, volunteer and neighbor. And that there will be recording devices on in this meeting. Yes, I should introduce myself. My name is Jennifer Loy, and I am co-president of the Houghton Neighborhood Association. My counterpart, Harris, is in Los Angeles for work currently, but I would like to take your prompt to also have the other members of the Houghton Neighborhood Association board stand up and wave. Got Malia in the back. Greg will be coming in soon. And we've got our secretary, Shell. And Greg, come on up. Okay, so what are neighbors? I know I've spoken with a few of you here this evening. There's many of you that have been to many of these meetings, and there are a few that are new. So thank you for coming if you've never come before. What we do at the Neighborhood Association is we provide information to you. We kind of take a special interest in the city business and what's happening in our neighborhood that's pertinent to all of you. And in our volunteer time, we try and find forums and ways to get that information to you so that if you're interested, you can take action, and we can tell you how and maybe how to be effective, and that when there are developments that do happen, based on information and action, you can evaluate what you think about that. Also, everybody that comes here, you are influencers. There are thousands of people in our neighborhood that don't know what's going on. So I want all of you to individually think that you're going to walk out of this meeting knowing a lot more than a lot of other people that would also like to know this information. So please take it upon yourself to reach out to your networks and share what you learned this evening and enfranchise more. I want to thank all of our neighbors that do a lot of volunteering. I see another one, council member Jay Arnold has joined us this evening. Thank you very much for coming. Some of the things that our neighbors have done in volunteering that are not currently serving on the board, but that are adjacent to our board, they've given us perspectives on development because of their professional background. They're leading special interest groups like Julie Freeman, and Megan Gardner, who have been leading the 108th special interest group. Julie, right there, wave, thank you, Julie, very much. We've got filming and photos. We've got people innovating with us with their AI skills. We love our partnership with Northwest University. And all of you currently and in the past who've helped out with our community celebrations. And the one that we have now is the summer soiree. So a couple little updates here. So we had our bomb cyclone, and boy did that disrupt our neighborhood. Holy smokes, 108th was out. But one of the other casualties of this was the play structure at Carillon Woods Park. So it's very, very damaged, and what we did learn is there are many neighbors, some of our youngest ones, that are anxiously awaiting for a repair. It can't be repaired because it's 17 years old and we can't get the parts, but there has been a new structure ordered, and it should be here by the end of April, early May, and then it should take 2 to 3 weeks to install it. So we're very much looking forward to bringing back Carillon Woods. I see some claps back there, thank you. And our other park, Phyllis Needy Park, is out of commission. The reason that is that they're replacing a sewer line. There was a cost-cutting measure in 1990, and it's a 75 to 80-year-old pipe, and those cost-cutting measures tend to come back to bite us at some point. I think we've all had that experience. So Public Works is routing a new sewer line around the huge maple tree there to make sure that that stays in good shape. And we really appreciate the City of Kirkland Parks Department for proactively reaching out to us and letting us know what's going on with that. But that should be over and patched back up pretty soon. Median transformations. So this is a new thing that we're tracking. Public Works seems to be filling in a lot of the medians that used to be planting medians with cement. And it's going to be stamped decorative cement. We're wondering what this means for 108th, because we've been asking for 108th to be planted and kind of revived. I think we all drive down into Bellevue and see how lovely their medians are and would like the same thing. So I would say that as a neighborhood association, this is a new issue we're tracking. We do not want our medians all filled in with concrete. We'd like them planted, but I don't know. We reached out to Parks or Streets and Grounds today, and we did not receive a response back on what the plan was for the medians on 108th, but we will keep you informed.
Hi everybody, I'm Greg Young. Got here a minute later than expected due to traffic coming home from soccer practice pickup, so I'm sure many have been before. Thank you for the grace. Anyways, just other little things around the neighborhood. Maybe folks have seen this before. Just a few changes coming to light from some of the zoning changes, and forgive me if I get any of my words incorrect here. But what used to be some of the single building homes now have multiple units being built on them, cottages, ADUs, garages, things like that. So just things from around the neighborhood that we have observed. And so this is just showing the impact of changes that have come through city ordinances. Again, may have my terminology incorrect there, but zoning changes, things like that coming into the neighborhood. So anyways, that's that one. Next slide, I believe. Kayla, back to Jen.
Okay, so most of you know that our lead on the K line is Gary Greenberg, and Gary cannot be with us this evening, unfortunately, so I'm gonna do my best to update you on what we know for now. Some new updates for those of you that have been following. King County Councilwoman Claudia Balducci, she represents our district of King County. We had invited her to our last meeting where this was the main topic, and she was not able to attend. And as a result of that, she reached out to us and asked to engage and wonder what's going on, what have you. And as a result of that, offered to come out and do a walk and talk to really better understand the issue, which we took her up on. During that engagement, the walk and talk, there was a wide variety of neighbors. They were to share many different perspectives. We thank you to any of the neighbors that have participated in that engagement or who have sent their feedback to the City Council and the City and Metro. Metro recently asked for public feedback in a survey. Many people participated in that. One thing that was a little bit odd is that kind of while the survey was happening, there were elements of public comment that were visible that Metro then shut down and closed off. And so there was a little bit of consternation about why they chose to do that, but we do look forward to seeing the results of that. Another new development is that the estimated cost of the project was reduced to 105 million from 120 million. We don't know why that is. Another new development is the city transportation manager is leaving Kirkland later this week and has stopped giving us responses on this project, but I'm sure that there's going to be a handoff at some point. What's happening next? So we've had many neighbors speak out at city council meetings, and it's very important. I think we've got city council members here this evening, but they love to hear from residents about what are the impacts, what should they consider when deciding on how to make their vote. And so it would be wonderful if this is something you're passionate about and want to share your opinion, to take the opportunity at the March 14th council meeting to share 3 minutes of your remarks at the council. The city is planning on completing their transit lanes in May, and data will be released to the community. And again, you have an opportunity to speak at city council meetings or email the county or the council or the city. And if you have any questions about how to do that, feel free to reach out to centralhoughton@gmail.com, and we're happy to coach you through that. So notable, in a recent document to the council, the proposed BAT, that's a bus access transit lane between 53rd and 60th, which is kind of in front of Northwest University here, may be subject to removal due to a budget revision. We're not clear if that included the proposed traffic signal on 60th. So that's a question we still have. In the city's record of support memo, it states that the city will continue to collaborate with Metro on speed and reliability improvements and will further evaluate project alternatives. Here's the bottom line. At this point, it's clear that residents and property owners are being heard. So that's really great news. The city has acknowledged concerns, so we're really happy about that. The city, quote, reserves final support of any particular investment in this location, 108th and 68th, until designs are completed and options and impact are more fully understood. At the last council meeting, Councilman Pascal also provided an amendment to further make sure that this is fully evaluated. And we are actually hearing that this is continues to be a very fluid situation. In fact, one of our neighbors, Dennis Glines, wave Dennis, and 4 other neighbors met with Councilman Black, I believe yesterday, is that correct? So thank you so much for your engagement, both of you. Here's a few pictures of Councilwoman Claudia Balducci out engaging with our neighbors. It was really great. Do you want to do this? No? Okay, okay. No? Okay. Now we'll switch topics.
All right, thank you for that start to the meeting, and thank you everybody for coming tonight. Whether community members, council members, really appreciate the attendance and engagement. A lot of interesting things going on in the neighborhood. And I wanted to introduce and thank, we have Brian and Carly here from Lake Washington School District. It was actually, I think, through one of these meetings and just community members commenting and talking to each other where we learned about some exciting potential developments with the Emerson campus over here. I think somebody in the community said, oh yeah, hey, we saw somebody doing survey work or something in a backyard or on the school property, and right here. So thank you for speaking up. That's exactly why we have things like this, so thank you for doing that. And through that, we were able to, because we hadn't heard about that before, reach out to Lake Washington School District. Brian was very engaging from the beginning, so thank you for that. And we just want, and there was questions that the community had when you initially brought that up about what's the scale of this, what's the timeline, things like that. And so since we aren't the ones to speak on behalf of these developments, we invited Lake Washington School District to come out and share about that. And so they agreed and found a timeline and were willing to come tonight. They put together a presentation they will share. Since we have a lot of topics to cover tonight, we are going to keep you to the 10 minutes of presentation. You got a lot of good slides to put together, but I will be kind of strict on the timeline. And then we do want to leave a solid 5 minutes at the end for any questions from the community. So with that, I will turn it over to Brian and Carillon. Thank you again for the engagement throughout this process. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you. All right, my name again is Brian Buck. I'm the Executive Director of Support Services at the Lake Washington School District. This is Carly Parkins. She's our Senior Project Manager on the project. So this is the question that was for us. Is there any specific feedback most interested in hearing from the group tonight? So we have kind of a standard presentation here. So I first wanted to touch on what is our Building Excellence Plan. There were 3 phases in that plan. The first step was a $295 million levy that was passed as the 2022 construction levy. This project, the Emerson Rebuild and Enlarge project, is part of that step 1 levy. We then had identified a potential step 2 bond measure, but since COVID, our enrollment has somewhat stalled. So we went out for a construction levy instead. So here is how the district kind of pivoted, given that our COVID enrollment has somewhat paused. And you can see there that the items that were lined out, 5th Comprehensive High School, an elementary in the Redmond area, and some of the others were crossed out. The Emerson project was to expand high school capacity on the west side of the district in the phase 1 construction levy. Emerson was the site that was chosen because Emerson also is a very old building. So here's Emerson right now. The project is a 20 high school classroom building. And this chart really kind of just shows some of the age that's in the building. The original building was designed as our central office building. It was repurposed for multiple programs. The HVAC systems are beyond their life. There's a limited number of classrooms. There is no shared instructional areas. There are interconnected classrooms, which means there are classrooms you got to go into to get to another classroom. And we have some aged portables on site as well. So it's a 1983 building. So the project, like I said, is part of the 2022 construction levy. The project is for 20 classrooms. The current building has 15 classrooms. And then I'm going to hand it over to Carly.
All right, so for our project team, we have the Lake Washington School District, of course, and then there are 3 unique programs on campus. That's Emerson High School, which is an alternative choice high school, the K-12 program, which is a cohort homeschool type program where those students are on site 2 days a week, 2 different cohorts. So they're on site Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And then North Star Middle School, which is a choice middle school. It has a wait list, I believe, of over 400 students. It's a very popular choice middle school that holds 90 students in a more modern modular campus that will remain. And then our progressive design build team, that is an alternative delivery we've been approved for, which is a very efficient and effective way to design and build these new structures, is Lee Treasure Lewis and Methuen Architecture. So here's our current schedule. You can see kind of the we are here. We're early in design. We did project validation first, which was a lot of our site investigation, our surveyors and arborists. That should not have been on your property, so give us a call if you see anybody. But that mostly is done, all of that site investigation, so thank you for your patience on that. And we're early in design now.
They were very good, nice young gentlemen.
Okay, glad to know.
Which is more surprising there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Brian said, this wasn't an originally designed project for the levy, but those funds got redistributed later through the board. So we're early in design now. I'll go through some of our design iterations we're studying right now. And we're looking to submit permitting this summer and then start construction in the second quarter of 2026 for a fall 2027 opening of the new building. So here's some opportunities to engage. We do have an Emerson project on our website. You can get through that through kind of that landing space on the bottom and kind of show how confusing through our website services, facilities, construction. There's an opportunity to receive email updates on this project. So anything we post, anytime we post anything specific to the Emerson project, it will email you if you're interested in following along. And so some of our next engagement opportunities, we will host a neighborhood meeting or community open house in the second quarter. That will be when we have some more designs developed for some public feedback. The city will also be in attendance to talk to their permitting process on that. So you'll
Hello. Okay, good evening. My name is Dietmar Schimmel. I'm a HNA board member. I'm also the representative for the HNA neighborhood at the monthly roundtable at Eastside Prep, where all things regarding La Quinta is going to be discussed within the business community and the various entities that are running the project. Tonight, we are presenting information, giving updates about the current status of the project, and we're hoping to get answers to the questions and the concerns that the neighborhood has. So again, thank you very much for attending, and thank you very much for the panel to take their time and to volunteer to speak up and answer to the neighborhood. Let me introduce the guests tonight. On the very left is Jelani Jackson. He is the manager of the Health Through Housing Initiative with King County. Seated next to him is Sunare Marshall. She's the acting director for the Housing and Development Council. Next to her is Sarah Dickmeyer. She is the external affairs manager of Plymouth Housing, the operator of the facility. Next to her is Jen Boone. She's the human service manager for the city of Kirkland. And next to her is a familiar face, Jim Lopez, deputy city manager of the city of Kirkland. And then let me introduce deputy chief Mike Jean of the Kirkland Police Department. He will make sure everything stays under control.
Keep it down, everybody.
So, and I'm hoping you can take a seat. There should be 6 seats on the panel. So
I'll come up.
Okay. So when King County purchased La Quinta in March of 2022, the public only was made aware of it when the deal already had been closed. When it became known what was to be happening at La Quinta, there was a lot of consternation and disbelief. Mainly due to the fact of the location next to no less than 4 schools and daycares, and there were major concerns about the impact on the neighborhood. And those concerns were not unfounded, just proved out to be true 2 weeks ago when INRIX, a large employer in Kirkland, announced they would be leaving the area due to the upcoming opening that is scheduled right now to be in July, August of this year. With that, I would like to explain the format for tonight. First of all, we will have presentations, starting with the City of Kirkland, followed by King County, and then Sarah from Plymouth will speak. Then we will move on to a panel discussion. Ahead of the meeting, the board submitted 10 questions to the panel, so there would be a time to sufficiently prepare for them. And after the panel discussion, there will be open mic as previously, as usual. So with that, I'm going to hand over the microphone to Jim. I presume it's you or it's Jim. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dietmar, and thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to see you all again tonight.
we're recognizing, we're hearing some feedback here.
This is the feedback before the feedback. This is the preview. Yeah, that's right. Is that okay?
It's gonna have to be, right? We don't know what it is. Okay, so you just go.
Let me just speak loud.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation to come here. My name is Jim Lopez. I'm one of the deputy city managers at the city, and I've been working on this project for years now. I can actually say that. So, in speaking with your organizers, and thank you again for the invitation, the idea tonight is to move through the presentations reasonably quickly so we can get to the questions. So I'm going to take you up on the challenge to be brief and talk just for a few minutes. The city has an entire initiative out right now around homelessness, and we urge you to get involved. We're talking about all the things we're doing, and we call it a continuum of care, from prevention to subsidized permanent housing. So for those who are interested in keeping this conversation going and seeing where this fits in our full systems approach to addressing this generational challenge, I welcome you to reach out to your neighborhood leaders or the city, and we'll follow up with you on that. Tonight's structure, I think, is very effective because the Neighborhood Association has sent us 10 questions, and we kind of organized our responses around those questions. Given that we have limited time and we know there are going to be a lot of questions and a lot of feedback, we're going to not speak a lot so that we can answer those questions and then take your feedback from our answers. So in this opening, I was asked to stick really almost specifically to those questions. So there's one real slide, if you could move forward. It's this March 2023 council approved document. So this document is the foundation for a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight. This document was an agreement we negotiated, I think, well over a year with your predecessors. I'm kind of like the elder statesman in the group.
You are.
Yeah, I think so. And we negotiated this agreement. We called it a permanent supportive housing agreement because we just needed to call it something. The city and the county have really been working very, very closely, and the city has been very proactive. And the council approved this agreement back in 2023. And you're going to see the genesis of things like the code of conduct and the safety plan and the good neighbor agreement and the screening that needs to happen and how we're going to interact around the facility. All of the DNA of all of those things comes from this agreement. So I have my book, I brought my agreement, and I look forward to talking to all of you about that. Very important work. And part of the reason why I'll turn the microphone over now that I bring up the agreement is to let you know just how much work has been done, how much intentional action has been done in order to make this the best permanent supportive housing it possibly can be. So thank you very much. That is my introduction, and I think I pass it to you, Dimar. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Jim. And I hand over the microphone now to Jelani, I presume. Yeah.
We can move on to the next slide. All right, so I just wanted to give a bit of a high-level overview, but also keeping it pretty brief. So, why health through housing? Health through housing is a regional approach to addressing chronic homelessness. That's exactly what it is. And this is built on the fundamental belief in the capacity for humans to change and to recover from homelessness. So this is a bit of some detail here. I feel like this will answer some questions, and that's why I've got some slides on this. This talks about the local referral process. You may be wondering how will folks actually arrive at this facility. And so this is the breakdown. 35% of folks who live in this building will absolutely come through this local referral process and will have ties to the community. And it's really important to say that because it's important to let the community know that we've we want to provide housing for folks that, should they become homeless, that they can actually stay in their community, not leave the place where they grew up, the corner store that they went to as a kid, and the schools that they went to and whatnot. Next slide. The other third, go back one more. There we go. The other, go back one more. No, you're going forward. That's what's happening. So there's a little, yep, just next slide. There we go. So the second third is a regional referral process. Yes, we can pull folks from the region. But as we note here that there is some preference in this process as well. And again, it gets back to preference for folks from the community. Next slide. All right, and then the final third is this undesignated third. Please do keep in mind, I've got that bolded text there for you. Local referrals receive first priority. And you'll see how this sort of, in the next slide, how this comes out. 85% across our portfolio are folks who have ties to the community that we get in housing. So what I hope to see in this healthier housing site in Kirkland is that folks can return back to Kirkland and they don't have to go to places like Seattle or Bellevue or whatever. All right. Now let's talk about who actually qualifies. And so in general, we're talking about folks who are chronically homeless or at risk for chronic homelessness. I will tell you what's not mentioned here is that the overwhelming majority of folks who end up in permanent supportive housing are older adults, 55 with a disability, and folks who are collecting Social Security disability. So they're older folks. And that's a bit of the criteria there. Next slide. And so you may be asking, what is at risk for chronic homelessness? And there's some of the criteria there. An adult with an identified disability. There's a couple other pieces there too. And we'll get into some of these and some of the questions that the association outlined for us. All right, next slide. So you may be asking, how does a person go from, maybe your idea is a person in a tent on the street, and how do they wind up in this permanent supportive housing? So I'll walk you through that. And I'm going to be using some of my history as a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Washington who did this work at the Veterans Administration for 7 years. So somebody has to choose to engage in service. They have to decide to want to engage with an entity like Plymouth or Catholic Community Services or other VA to actually pursue some housing. And they have to decide that they want that. We don't force people into housing. The second piece is, after they do that initial engagement, they actually have to sit down for an assessment. Who are you? What are your needs? Let me hear a little bit about you. Let's fill out some paperwork and enroll you in some services. The next piece is that organization that they work with. They start and enter them into the coordinated entry system, which is a regional approach to sort of funneling everybody who's in need of services to one point so that resources can be, housing resources can be distributed equitably. In our healthier housing, as I just outlined, we have a local referral process that we use heavily. Next, the service provider creates a information packet. You can think of this as a sort of documents that you might assemble for yourself to apply for an apartment, but includes things like income verification, Social Security card, picture ID, verification of a disability, and it's this pretty big packet that gets assembled. And I'll tell you, having assembled literally hundreds of those packets in my 13 years as a social worker, it takes a lot of work. And many people actually just filter themselves out of that process. And they go, you know, actually I don't want to go with you to the Social Security Administration office in downtown Seattle on 2nd Avenue because I don't want to sit in the office for 2 hours. No, thank you, Jelani. Next time I see you, maybe I'll take you up on that offer for housing. And so what you find is that folks kind of self-select into this process. And again, this is them choosing to engage in housing and ultimately engage in services. And so we send that packet off to a housing provider like Plymouth, and they review it. They review it for accuracy, they review it to make sure that this person is a good fit for their property and that they can meet their needs, whatever those might be. And then they get to make a decision. And that's how a client actually lands into a housing facility like we're talking about here. Next slide. And so again, just one more data point. This is across the entire healthier housing portfolio. We have an incredible success rate of folks choosing to stay in housing. Having done intensive case management, which is defined as roughly in the VA's world, not in Plymouth's world. But what I used to do is one visit once per month was actually defined as intensive case management. I will tell you that Plymouth will have way more hands-on support at their facility. And so again, to choose to stay in that sort of overwhelming supportive environment and actually engage with a case manager and remain in that housing is people are choosing to stay housed. And one of the conversations that I had with somebody at the Lindbergh group is that Kirkland's actually a pretty nice place to live. And I think that as the folks stabilize in this housing and they will come to appreciate all that Kirkland has to offer, and they will choose to stay housed. And they won't choose to return back to the streets. That's our best hope there. And so again, King County is committed to investing in people. We're invested in people, especially those who want to choose to engage in services and engage in the recovery process for services.
So I'm heading, next up is Sarah from Plymouth, and we're already running behind, so.
Saved the longest presentation for when we're behind. So I'm going to talk a little bit longer than Jelani and Jim did, just because we know that Plymouth hasn't given a formal introduction to this group before, so we wanted to provide you with more dimension to who Plymouth is and what we're excited to do in Kirkland. So my name, as Dietmar said, is Sarah Dickmeyer. I am External Affairs Manager at Plymouth Housing. Thank you very much for having us this evening, and to Dietmar for his regular attendance at our monthly Lindbergh meetings, which we've been having since November. We really appreciate you all for providing space for this conversation tonight. So to start, we always like to ground our conversation in our mission, which is to eliminate homelessness and address its causes by preserving, developing, and operating safe, quality, supportive housing, and by providing adults experiencing homelessness with opportunities to stabilize and improve their lives. Next slide. Plymouth was founded in 1980 and has been operating for 45 years this year. What started as a group of volunteers trying to help people sleeping on a downtown church's doorstep grew to the organization you know today. We have 17 buildings in King County, including one in Bellevue that opened summer 2023, and one in Redmond slated to break ground later this year. We serve formerly homeless adults, and by that I want to emphasize individuals exiting homelessness, because once each person signs their lease and moves into a Plymouth building, they are home. And we do this because we believe that everyone deserves a home. Our model of permanent housing paired with on-site supports, including 24/7 staff, gives our residents the solid base they need to rebuild their lives. As you can see, our model is in the name. By permanent, we mean there is no time limit on our housing. By supportive, we mean that we connect our residents with services that can help them thrive. Examples of services include case management, on-site health care, prepared meals, and more. And we believe in housing before anything else, because we know that people cannot improve their lives until they have a safe, stable place to live. Plymouth serves formerly homeless adults, as we've said. Of our nearly 1,400 residents, 62% are seniors, 55 and over, 52% are people of color, and 11% are veterans. That is pretty similar to the chronically homeless population at large. And the gentleman in this photo, Michael, had lost his job and was living out of his RV in Redmond. Year before last, he moved into Plymouth Crossing, our building in Bellevue. He receives on-site clinical support tailored to his health needs, and this on-site support, combined with a more stable living environment, has given him a solid base to manage his health and plan for the future. Every person's path in and out of homelessness is unique. While there are many similarities, we know from our decades of experience that every individual who comes into one of our buildings has a different set of needs. So because of this, we build services around each individual. Each resident is assigned a case manager who checks in with them regularly, connects them to internal or external services, assists with enrollment and eligible benefits, and works with them to set and achieve their goals for stability and well-being. Our buildings are staffed 24/7 to ensure someone is always available to provide response or support as needed. And we know that homelessness can be an isolating experience, and the building community is a critical part of recovery. Our staff work to create a welcoming and supportive environment through community events, shared spaces, and trauma-informed design standards. And here's some of our staff. We know that there was interest in what staff supports will be available. So as a whole, most of our buildings have a staff to resident ratio of 1 to 5. Primary roles include a site director who oversees day-to-day operations, specialists in individual and community services, case managers, which we talked a bit about, that work with residents, and support aides who assist with a range of tasks with tenants, including cleaning, laundry, errands. It really varies. We believe it's the responsibility of everyone at Plymouth to support our residents in maintaining their housing, which is why our site staff are trained in de-escalation, trauma-informed care, and first aid. We also know this group was interested in learning more about how we're funded. So for most Plymouth buildings, we're funded by a combination of public grants, private donations, and rent. Each building is a little different, but the Kirkland building is even more so. Because the Help Through Housing initiative is funded by a local sales tax, the county is going to be the primary operational funder in Kirkland. We expect this to come out to around $27,000 per unit per year. And I know you may be thinking, that sounds like a lot. So on our next slide, we'd like to provide some context. For the same cost of 16 days in a hospital or 10 weeks in jail, we can house someone at Plymouth Housing for a full year. And this is pretty common sense, but worth illustrating here. When you're living outside, you're inherently destabilized, and that can often mean spending time in hospital or jail. When someone has access to a safe, permanent home, they're able to take care of their basic needs. And because permanent supportive housing comes with on-site supports, they don't have to do it alone. This is not only a compassionate response, it's effective. Nearly 95% of people who come to Plymouth do not return to homelessness, again, for the rest of their lives. We also know this group has some concerns about community safety. We'll talk a bit more later, but we want to emphasize that everyone benefits from a safe community. Our residents, our staff, and our neighbors alike. In addition to providing on-site supports for our residents, which we've already covered, we wanted to highlight our commitment to building community ties in the interest of safety. Plymouth has an internal safety department that builds relationships with first responders in the cities in which we operate. And at Kirkland, we'll be designating a neighborhood liaison who will be an identified point of contact for community members. Taking care of each other requires communication, trust, and community building, and we're doing a little bit of that tonight. We also know that this group had some questions about what expectations are set for residents at this future building, so we wanted to share this briefly as just a reminder that this building is not a shelter. This building is more like a market rate apartment than it is different. And every resident upon move-in will sign a lease, which contains typical elements of a rental agreement, including respect for common spaces, timely payment of rent, etc. And now this is stated with the understanding that many residents will be experiencing challenges that by definition require some support. But we wanted to make clear that this is not a walk-in, no-rules space. Real briefly, we know that homelessness is regional and that more resources are needed in more places. So we wanted to highlight our impact on the east side. So we opened the first permanent supportive housing in Bellevue in 2023, on the east side in 2023, Plymouth Crossing in Bellevue, providing 92 homes. And we're excited to provide more in Redmond in 2026 and at the former Quinta here in Kirkland later this year. To wrap up, we know that community is built through relationships. And as we join these new communities on the east side, we conduct our engagement efforts through the lens of community integration and relationship building. Pictured here are some of our activities on the east side, including hosting a tour of our Bellevue building with at least one council member in attendance tonight, and Jim right here. Like our service philosophy, we try to meet people where they are. Activities range from hosting booths, one-on-one meetings, joining local associations, and convening or attending neighborhood forums like this one tonight. We've heard from community members across the east side that this kind of housing is needed and that there are real communication challenges affecting new housing and the issue of homelessness more broadly. And we believe that relationships are key to bridging this communication gap and can enable us to meet what should be our shared goal of a safe, welcoming, and connected community for current and future residents alike. Next slide. Finally, here are some of the most important resources we wanted to share with you. If you'd like to learn more or continue the conversation after tonight. So please, we encourage you to take a photo and share with whoever you know who may be interested. We have our website, plymouthhousing.org. where you can find us on social media, our dedicated email for Kirkland community members, and a plug to attend our Eastside Community Office Hours, which we hold monthly on the second Wednesdays of the month from 11 to 1 at the Together Center in Redmond. If you haven't been, it's a really great space. And it happens to be the second Wednesday tomorrow. So, you know where we'll be. And thank you very much for having us today.
Thank you, Sarah. And I can confirm that Sarah has always been accessible for any kind of question and conversation. So now we're moving on to the questioning. One more? Yeah, one more? Yeah. Okay. So the first question we ask, because it has been a common topic, what is the background check and can this be explained? So is this going to be mandatory for everybody? Does it involve criminal background check? So that's the first question that we asked the panel. So who would like to start? Oh, you got it.
Okay, so I'll start, and panelists, please fire away when you're ready. All right, so the first question, background checks. So actually, kudos to the city of Kirkland for engaging the county very early in this process. One of the things that we worked out was that the city of Kirkland wanted King County support in conducting a portion of the criminal background check that all residents will have prior to moving in. And so the King County sheriffs will actually handle the portion of the background check, specifically looking for folks who have criminal history that would rule them out from living at the Kirkland PSH site. The city of Kirkland.
Criminal history rule them out?
What's that?
Does any criminal history rule them out?
So, go ahead.
No, hello. No, there is a very specific criminal history that rules them out, and that's sex offenders next to schools. So the first layer of criminal background check is that, and we've engaged the sheriff's office to facilitate that national background check process. It's very easy. It's easier for the sheriff to do it. It was an important thing that we did when we negotiated the agreement, because you have to be proactive on that. The state agency is not necessarily going to know if somebody is coming into this facility. So what we did was we worked closely with the county so that we could proactively screen anyone that goes into the facility to see if they were on a list that would prohibit them because of their offense, their sex offense, to be next to a school. So that's the first level, I think, that we were referencing.
And for more information, actually, I found this week doing some research in preparation for tonight that the city actually has a really great website on this. And I believe they stood this up in response to the 2022 meeting that we had with our predecessors, and its responses to Central Houghton and Lakeview neighborhoods. It goes into pretty good detail on the specific offenses that would be rule outs.
I think the main concern, and I'd like to bring this up, this was something that was quite spicy as this went along. There's a request from the community for national criminal background checks. And the reason that is that the King County process is more relaxed and it doesn't do a national search. And so we're concerned and would love to have continuing conversation on that, so that if somebody has been a perfect citizen here for the last 15 years but murdered somebody in Oklahoma in 2001, that's meaningful to your staff, that's meaningful to the neighbor in the facility, you know what I mean, to even manage them. So we would love to have that. That's still something we're not satisfied with, or I know I'm not, is the King County process.
Yeah, as somebody who, again, literally done hundreds of folks into permanent supportive housing, that whole packet process, and part of it was actually trying to do my best to verify someone's registered sex offender status. I will tell you it's hard, but you know who's really good at it? The King County Sheriff, because that's in their purview. That's their job to actually maintain that. Exactly. No, and it does pull nationally. I can tell you, it pulls nationally for sure. Yes. It does.
the non-killer stuff.
You would have to do a national background check.
That's what we want.
Yeah, because other stuff like burglary,
Yeah.
assault.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gonna have to probably move on to question number 2, otherwise we will be here at midnight.
I think you have a really big question.
Question is?
What about other crimes?
So, the act,
Murderers, you know.
so, I can take that if you guys don't mind. There is a kind of fundamental baseline that we negotiated with the county that I'm gonna go over with you right now. To the extent that Plymouth does something different or more, I will leave it to Plymouth. I know that we've just recently drafted the code of conduct, and what the specific practices of the operator, I kind of leave to you guys to discuss whenever you're ready. But let me tell you from the city and the county's perspective. All the sex offender crimes that prohibit you from moving next to a school would be researched on a national basis by the sheriff, as Jelani said, who is optimally situated to do that. If in the course of the application, it's discovered that the person has a sex offense that doesn't preclude them from living next to the school, they will do a criminal background check. That's by our agreement. That's my notebook. If during the process by which people are interviewing for suitability, and there's a lot of good information, as Jelani noted, this is all on our website. It does get a little detailed, but I'm here to summarize for you. If they discover criminal history through the colloquy, through the give and take of the process, they have to do a background check. Okay, so we're trying to be respectful of human dignity, and while at the same time being responsive to the community. If there's evidence of violence, is something we don't want. Now, to the extent that there may be other processes in addition to those processes, which are in our agreement that I started the slideshow with, I leave to Plymouth. But that is a direct answer to your concerns, very well stated, that the city has and the county have multiple levels of what we think are reasonable inquiry to make sure that a person is best suited to come to the facility.
So did you say you only do a background check if you find that they are a sex offender? Or that triggers the criminal?
I'll say that again. There's the sex offender level that prohibits you from going into the facility, right? Because it's legally prohibited for you to go into the facility. Then there's on a sex offender registry that doesn't prohibit you from being next to a school, that requires a criminal background check. That triggers a criminal background check. Then there's an interview process where if it is discovered through that interview process that there has been violence in this person's history, that triggers a criminal background check. So it is an attempt to be reasonable around respectful of people's need and right to have housing and privacy versus the very legitimate concern of the community around.
So if the second part, so
probably
it sounds
gonna-
like they won't, at the interview, they don't reveal anything, and they don't do a background check, is that correct?
If it's not discovered through the interview, it would not be, unless Plymouth has they're the operator. This is what we did with the county prior to selection of the operator.
But it doesn't rule them out, it just triggers a background check.
It triggers a background, does not rule them out.
Okay.
It triggers a background check. That's correct.
Okay. Hopefully we can address more of those questions in the Q&A section, but I would like to move on to question 2. So this is more on a large-scale approach. So the Health to Housing program will provide about 1,600 housing units, but the unsheltered population is a multiple of that. And the Health to Housing approach is a very, very costly approach. So that if you factor in building costs, by the time the building will open, each of the units will have cost the taxpayer about $400,000. In the meantime, we have 250 tiny homes unoccupied. And so the question is this approach scalable? And what happens with the other unsheltered population? And why are we not using the tiny homes?
Well, tiny homes are 4 walls, a roof, and a door. It's not a home. I think tiny homes are great, they serve a purpose, but we're talking about something completely different. This is permanent supportive housing. This is a home that is yours, you have your own bathroom, you can make a meal in your own home. It's far different than a home in a parking lot, and that's what a tiny home is. Help through housing is a very specific slice of the pie that addresses homelessness. And leveraging the power and might of the county, we can fund what is ultimately rehousing folks who often have very significant barriers to getting rehoused. I will tell you from my experience, the most significant barriers are always the fact that they're low income, they have poor or no credit, or they have poor or no rental history. Those tend to be the first three things that all landlords are most concerned about. And so the county partnering with wonderful partners like we have here today enables us to attack that part of the problem and let other organizations who are working on the other portions of that problem, like for instance, you may have heard of MFT properties, which is a tax subsidy thing, and there's also senior housing, you may have heard of SHAG, they get tax credits and so offer lower rents to seniors and things like that. We're doing a heavy lift here, and it requires this level of coordination to do that. And it's resource intensive. I will tell you, what else is resource intensive is having somebody remain in the hospital for one night of care. I happen to know at a specific hospital, it's over $5,000 a night for one bed day of care. That's expensive. A day in jail is expensive. And so this housing appears to have a very high upfront cost, but look at the cost that we're already spending on this issue.
But the fact you are comparing people living this house with people living in jail, make people concerning.
The fact you are comparing the cost of people living in jail versus people living this HTH, meaning you are comparing the same type of people. So why, you are comparing the cost for that same type of people, and you are using taxpayers' dollar for addressing this tiny fraction problems, which it just doesn't make sense. And the fact you are comparing that with people in jail also doesn't make sense.
Hi, everyone. Sunari Marshall. I'm Acting Director of Housing and Community Development at the county. I think one of the reasons we're making that comparison is that we have started to see more criminalization of sleeping outside in this community. I'm not saying in Kirkland, but in King County and in Washington State. And so this is often being proposed as an alternative to bringing people inside to very supportive environments like permanent supportive housing. And what we are saying is that, this supportive housing that allows people to recover from living outside, recover from homelessness, is a cheaper and more viable alternative that actually helps people stay housed. What we see when folks go to jail is they come in, they go out, they end up back in jail, same with the hospital. They come in, they might get some kind of treatment for a short period of time, and if they are viable to go back outside, they end up back outside, and it ends up being a very expensive and taxpayer paid for problem in both of those scenarios. So we're looking at an alternative solution that really provides stability for people that can help them for the long term.
So thank you for that. And we do understand that this is costly. And in many ways, this is a very powerful act of humanity because folks this is their last opportunity in many cases. But there's something else about the assumption in this question that I want to raise to all of you, which is the 250 tiny homes in Seattle. Well, Kirkland has a problem. We have a problem with homelessness. Cities are ground zero for homelessness. We get complaints all the time. We have entire teams now designed for homelessness because we don't allow people to live under bridges or in parks. We don't allow it. It's not according to the city rules. So people need to live somewhere. And what I would say is 65% of these rooms, these homes, are going to local unhoused people. 35% guaranteed, and that other 30%, if we can refer people within 90 days, they go to our local community. That's 65% in a local referral network so that the city has tools to make sure that folks aren't living in our streets, but they're living in a safe place. And I think that's a powerful response to the assumptions in this question. Yes.
I was just wondering, who do these local referrals come from? And then once you receive them, obviously since they're homeless, how do you reach out to them? And then you're saying that they're people in the Kirkland community, and I was just wondering, the average rent I just looked up in Kirkland is about $2,800. So how do they transition from paying nothing, or I don't know, it said pay rent, I don't know if there is a price, back into the community at $2,800?
It's a great question. The local referral network really comes from our system. We have about 700 shelter beds. Shelters are not permanent supportive housing. Shelters are emergency care. Sophia Way, New Bethlehem, these are some of the shelters. The system working would be allowing folks who are living in those temporary areas where oftentimes they're sharing their bedroom privacy with many other people in their bathroom space into a place of more permanency, more dignity. And I love shelters, I'm not being disparaging. They're amazing people and they do an incredible service for us. But the referral network would take folks from those organizations and move them into permanent supportive housing if they're ready. And part of Jen's work, maybe you could speak to this, Jen, is working with the local coordinators in our community who know the folks and who can assess whether or not they're ready to move into permanent housing. That's the city's strategy with the county and with Plymouth, is how can we use this, the county's, we're paying for it in our tax money, but this is a county program. How can we take this program and all the resources associated with it and help us to meet our challenge of our very burdened shelter system and the folks that haven't even made the shelter? I don't know if you want to make a note about the network.
Yeah, so the county leads the process in activating the local referral network, but they are partnering with the city to identify who would be those referral partners. So those would be our shelter providers. Like Jim mentioned, we have over 700 beds on the east side. Any given night, we're at capacity for our men's shelter, our women's shelter, our safe parking programs. And so by allowing folks to move out of the shelter into permanent supportive housing, it allows us to activate those shelter programs as intended. Right now, for our men's shelter, we have over 70 men that have been there for over a year, which means it doesn't allow our emergency shelter to operate as intended. So we partner with our shelter providers, we partner with our safe parking programs. The city also has a homeless outreach coordinator that's part of a larger homeless assistance and response team. And so those folks will also be referring bodies to help connect local folks to the space.
Maybe the next question, we can probably make it a little bit brief.
Question here. Brian Olay, you bring up two concepts. One, ROI, return on investment of the money we put in versus get out. And two, criminalization. So really, really explicit. Have you done analysis on previous HTH sites to understand the impact on crime around the surrounding areas? That's one. And two, do you understand the ROI of other alternatives like the small houses, XYZ? And here's the main thing. This looks like it's a very high expenditure, high value in, and you're saying we're getting value out and there's an ROI. I want you to compare that to other alternatives, and if you've assessed those alternatives, if not, we can, move that on. But really talk about the criminalization of the surrounding areas, please.
Data, we want data.
Well, I'll speak to the numbers. We work with Mike in the police department as best we can to collate numbers that might be relevant, because this is our first permanent supportive housing in Kirkland. But I'll pass it down if you guys want to talk about it.
Actually, I think we may address the criminal aspect in one of the further questions. So,
Aren't there a lot of HTA sites?
yeah.
Yeah,
We have this question coming up.
Oh,
So
okay.
that, yeah.
You want to wait?
Okay, and then I'm gonna jump in here too, so.
Otherwise, we're never gonna make it past question number 2.
Yeah, guys, we do, keep your questions.
So-
We do have 10 questions, we wanna get through them ideally in about 3
So,
minutes, so we can have
The
open mic.
next question is really basically, it centers around the available treatment options. So does the county have the treatment options available, both in terms of mental health care and addiction treatment? Which is obviously, I know that the minor issues can be dealt with at the facility, but in light of the reports about financial struggles of the various places, what is the strategy there?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to read some notes to you. So part of Healthier Housing funds what is called a mobile response team. And so what this is it's a on-call support for our housing operators to call should they need a higher level of intervention. And I'm not going to get into the details, but it is really quite robust and it is well funded and our operators love it. They love that extra support. I will also say that operators and case managers on site are great at getting folks signed up for programs like Medicaid, which offers additional access to behavioral health supports in the community.
Just real quick, so folks may know the building is currently undergoing renovations right now, conversion from its use as a hotel. And we are keeping that in mind because we intend to provide as many services as possible on site. So we're building out offices with waiting rooms, one for a behavioral health practitioner and one for medical staff. We're also actively coordinating with external partners such as Connections Health Solutions, which is the walk-in crisis care clinic, which opened up recently in Kirkland to provide our residents with off-site support. But in general, our staff connects individuals with programs like Medicaid, veterans benefits, and resources in community that best serve each individual. We will have a van to provide transportation to appointments or other life needs as needed. And our staff are, as we mentioned, are trained in trauma-informed care, which combined with 24/7 staff presence, community activities, and those connections to services can often really make the difference in creating a stabilizing environment.
Thank you, Sarah. Next question is a very specific one. Can individuals that are deemed incompetent by a court be admitted to the facility? The background for that question is those individually enjoy special protection, both in terms of what police can do in terms of arresting and how long they can be held. And so, can this question be answered, please?
I don't know about this part you added, but we certainly answered the part that's on the screen. So a person who completes their requirements as stipulated by the court, meaning they followed a court process and a judge signed off on it, and they followed whatever those community-based requirements are, and if the prospective resident is willing to sign the lease agreement, code of conduct, all of that, yes, they could theoretically be eligible to move into a healthier housing site. What I will say, two things about this. So this is almost certainly in reference to True Blood classification of folks.
Exactly.
And what I would say is we have True Blood as a term because the state of Washington got sued for not providing adequate care to those class of folks. And so we have to be careful about trying to establish a unique rule for a certain classification of people because that could actually open up the city of Kirkland, the county, and Plymouth to a lawsuit. We don't want to get sued, that would be bad. The second thing is that the third thing is when you get into competency, well, what about somebody who requires a payee? They have been deemed incompetent to manage their own finances. Would we say they can't live in our housing either? What about somebody who's not eligible to make decisions for their health care? And so we have to be careful about that sort of thing again because we don't want to get sued. And we also just don't want to discriminate folks and erect unnecessary barriers to housing. Because ultimately, again, these are folks who are choosing housing and choosing to engage in treatment and services. We should be able to afford that person that opportunity.
Thank you. So next question is, and probably either Sarah or Jelani maybe explain how does the eviction process work. So I'm sure the majority of the residents will be perfectly fine, but there will be a number of residents that will cause issues in the community. How is the eviction process handled? What is your prior experience based on other location? Could you explain that, please?
Yeah, so folks remember from my presentation, the reminder that we have a lot more similarities to market rate housing than differences. This is sort of one of those cases. So similar to other apartment buildings in Kirkland, residents at Plymouth sign leases, and we reserve as the landlord the right to serve warning notices if a resident violates terms of their lease or otherwise are impacting the building's community, as well as pursue eviction when necessary. As a permanent supportive housing provider, we see it as our responsibility to make every effort to encourage and assist people to resolve whatever underlying issues are at play and reinforce appropriate and healthy tenant behavior. And this can involve strategies or connections to programs that can help them meet their rent obligations, instruction or assistance in housekeeping, cultivation of social skills for living peacefully with neighbors, and connections or referrals to community partners and mental health providers. We care very deeply about every one of our residents, and we're committed to working with them to preserve their housing, which is why we continually outreach and offer options. While every individual case is different, and that is true also for market rate housing, every individual case is different, we generally consider the progressive nature of the behavior and their response to staff engagement, as well as, of course, the severity of the violations when we make those decisions on evictions. At the point in which an individual requires care that beyond what we feel we can provide or is a danger to other residents and staff, we look to transition that person to an alternate placement if available or pursue eviction for community safety.
Thank you. So this is definitely a question for the city, and that got really current with the recent news. So if there's a negative impact on the surrounding business community, or in the surrounding community, is there basically a point where the city would reassess their support and reassess its involvement into the project? Basically, with INRIX leaving, that means one employer is gone, one empty building. Is there a point, if there are other businesses leaving, where the city would be forced to reassess the project itself?
We can answer that one further on. Let's get back to the emergency call.
Oh, sorry.
Let's do this one. We can do that.
Let's go back.
Do this one.
Okay,
Do this one now.
So the most accurate answer to that is we have an agreement with the county. That's the agreement that I've been talking about, and the agreement has consequences. The county has to live up to their end of the agreement, and we have to live up to our end of the agreement. So I think that's the best way for me to answer that. Now, in the agreement for lawyers in the room, we have several on our council, there's equitable relief where we can demand that they do what they said they were going to do. That's called an equitable action. And then there's damages, like we can fine them. If we win our case, we can fine them a significant fees.
Our own money, right?
Well, I'm just answering the question. You know, there's a contract, and the contract has equitable and liquidated damages in it, and that's the best way to answer that. I mean, the more complex questions about what would happen to the permanent housing, that kind of would probably litigate it. But I think if you go through our agreement, we went through some significant detail to ensure, in complete good faith, and the county did as well, that we would live up to our promises.
Thank you.
The question was what happens if they don't live up?
Yeah, that would be the equitable relief where we could go to court and require that. I guess theoretically, I wouldn't limit any of the, it's very complicated to do that, but I think there is, the most important point I could make to all of you tonight is that there is a contract where the city has rights.
Go ahead. Okay, I have a question. I'm a business owner that's about a block and a half away.
Yes.
That's involved with daycare, with children. There's several other facilities around that have children. The children in my facility, one group are autistic. I work with them. I'm very compassionate, but the placement of this whole project is totally unrealistic. Further away, I We went through this a while back when they were talking about it, and then I thought it was a dead issue for reason of safety. I mean, people will be walking around, and that's what people do. And walking around, there's schools, there's, besides my daycare that's in my building, and the autistic children that's in my building. We have up the street, another daycare, Crestwood, and this whole idea is a fantastic, wonderful idea, but NIMBA, right in my backyard, I guess that's NIMBY.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I got the point.
I also have a little trouble hearing this whole thing, so if you could speak loudly, and you're talking about how to fix the problem can be fixed by not having the problem as a problem in our area. I mean, this is a residential area with very light and very, I would say, businesses that are involved with kids and children, and it's not a place for people to be walking around, and then they get your process of evicting them, of course. Of course you'd have that. But meanwhile, what's happened that caused that issue? I mean, I'm just a grandpa too, you know, 18 grandchildren.
Wow.
You know, and I love kids, and I love the idea. It's just, it would be better outside the area. I mean, this area. You want my mic back?
Do you want me to speak to that?
Really brief, Jim, and we can move on.
Well, thank you, sir, thank you very much. I appreciate you, that's not easy to say, and I appreciate you coming forward to say it. The safety and security of our community is our top priority.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
We've been,
Not our children.
we've been meeting in that area every month with, I don't know if you've been part of the Lindbergh group, but we've been meeting every month. It's been organized by the Eastside Preparatory Academy. And the county's been there, and the city's been there, our police, our fire. And our commitment to the community is to work closely with those most in close proximity to the facility to do several things. And we just published a code of conduct where everybody has to rule but live by. I mean, they're human beings, they're living in a facility, they have to live by the rules. We're working to design the site with fencing and other physical attributes that would make the site safer. We're working together on the good neighbor and the policy and making sure that we're communicating what's going on there. And those are the trappings, I think, of what our duty is, to make sure that we care, that we're present, that we're not just having a facility stand up, and that the city and the police and the fire department aren't relevant to the situation.
Jim, I don't know you.
Yeah.
I know your position. What you just said is the biggest bunch of bullshit I have ever heard. And I'm going to tell you something. This is serious. I'm the largest employer closest to that building. I have a responsibility to my staff. I have never been contacted by the city of Kirkland or ever had any sort of a plan or discussion, ever. So what you just said is wrong.
Sir, I appreciate your feedback. I do.
And you are such a politician.
But
no,
sir,
this is not true. This should not be there. You got kids all over that place. My staff, half of them are female, and I'm concerned about them, and I will tell you something. I have a responsibility to their safety, and you, in your King County, are not backing me up. And here's what's going to happen, Jim. If one of my female staff people get hurt, raped, or robbed, I will sue your ass. So, no, listen to that. Don't just give me this, oh, okay, then we're going to take care of you, don't worry about it. You've got a serious problem on your hands.
My response to you is factual. It's not emotional. My response to you is factual. We've been meeting with this community for almost 6 months. It's called the Lindbrook Group. We've relied on the Eastside Preparatory Academy to help organize it. They have been robust meetings. We meet every single month. That is a factual response. It's not emotional.
You have picked probably, so I raised my kids in Houghton. I know the community well. You probably picked the worst location you could possibly have picked.
Yes.
I don't know who it was who decided. I have no idea. I could pick better locations, safer locations, but you're surrounded by kids. And I don't know why you did that. You need to go back to the drawing boards, start over, or else all these people here are going to, the media, the minute something goes wrong, you guys are going to get toasted.
Yes.
And I don't want to see that happen. I love Kirkland. It's an amazing community, but you're going to destroy it because of this.
Well, I think my most important response to you is the assertion that we have not been present and that we don't care. We have been present and we've been working very closely with, there's members in this room that have come as part of the Lindbrook Group. We meet every month. The county's been there, the city's there, Plymouth is now there, and we're working through all of these agreements together. That's just my factual answer. The decision about the location is a completely different issue, but for your original assertion about whether or not the city has been present, we have been very present.
Talk about the
Thank
data
you.
I asked.
Thank you. That's actually, so next question actually centers around the data, and that's where Deputy Chief Jean will come in. So has the Kirkland Police done an assessment in terms of what number of service calls to expect based on Plymouth Crossing, and whether they are adequately staffed to handle any issues?
Thank you very much. Mike St. Jean, I'm one of the deputy chiefs for your police department. So this is a tricky one. I'm not gonna BS anybody, okay? So what we can do is anytime a facility comes in with 100 beds, right, that's gonna be concerning to us is what kind of calls for service increase is that gonna be for our staffing levels. We're always looking at that. We're always trying to figure out, do we need more police officers? Do we need to reallocate? All those kind of things. So this is no different than that. What we have done is looked at call for service numbers on similar type facilities, right? We have a number of permanent affordable housing units throughout this city. And are the calls for service at those higher than, say, a senior center with the same 100 beds? Yes, they are.
What about other Plymouth sites?
So the other Plymouth sites, so Bellevue's been open on the east side, right? So we try to do the regional side of that. Bellevue's been open for a little over a year. We've talked to Bellevue at length. They have a hard time splitting that apart because the men's shelter is right next to it, which is a completely different facility and all of that. So we're having a hard time figuring out exactly what that call volume is going to be. We're aware of it. We're continuing to have those conversations, and we're going to continue to look at our staffing once it's up and running. What I can say is that I've been very pleased with the partnership that we've developed with Plymouth Housing. So we were part of the code of conduct. We've been part of the the fencing plan, and what that's going to look like as far as ingress, egress, being buzzed in, not just people coming in, all of those things. And so we've had wonderful conversations with that. I've seen the code of conduct. I was pleasantly surprised at that. I'll let you know. And so what we still have yet to do, just up front, is the safety and security plan. As part of the contract that Deputy City Manager Lopez talked about, is this thing can't open until the Chief of Police signs off on the safety and security plan. So we have developed this partnership. That's our next thing we're going to look at, and I'll be very interested to see how all that goes.
But Kirkland residents, if you have to hire more people, we pay either in higher taxes or lower services to the rest of us. So where's the money going to come from King County so that the burden's not coming to us?
For sure. So the question was, City of Kirkland money, if we have to hire more officers, who's paying for that? Should be county, not community.
You betcha.
I don't think it can be quite that simple. Obviously, if we need more officers, that is going to be a decision by city council, and whatever that looks like and how to fund that. It won't be because of this. We have, I mean, anybody drives around the city, you can see how much high-density housing is going in. At some point, we're going to need more officers, right? But we're not there yet. We're just constantly looking at that. So I don't mean to like kind of go around you or whatever, but I understand your question. But you know,
The number of calls you're going to have there compared to an apartment building is going to be tremendously high.
I mean, quick follow-up from me. So as far as I'm aware, since Plymouth Crossing opened, there were more than 300 service calls to the Bellevue Police Department. But you're saying basically it's difficult to break them up. How many calls were actually for the permanent supportive housing portion of that 3-building complex?
that's correct. So in our conversations with Bellevue, they're having a hard time splitting the men's shelter with the Plymouth Crossing. That's correct, right? Plymouth Crossing? To split that up, right? And who's tied to what facility, which are very different facilities.
Because it certainly would be very troubling if every day there's a siren popping up next to the facility in Kirkland.
Sure, I understand that.
What about Seattle and other cities?
So we do have data. We ran data around our facilities. And there is an imagined housing property, several of those properties. That's permanent affordable housing. It's not exactly the same thing. Well, I'm giving you the answer to the question about what data we have. I don't need to share it. Well, if you look at the New Bethlehem and Helen's Place and assisted living in Kirkland Crossing, we ran data on those to the extent, this is what the police department ran for us when we asked what the impacts would be. And it is in the same universe of what we're expecting, but it's not permanent supportive housing. The gentleman asked for the data that we have, and that's the data.
So, excuse me, could you just repeat that? So it is the data from Kirkland Crossing?
Okay, Kirkland Crossing.
And could you please help us understand that those are two buildings, and one building is full rent, and one building is affordable rent. And it'd be very interesting to see how the calls differentiate between those two buildings from a data point. Thank you.
So we actually pulled that data. So to her point, we have a market rate apartment, so this is pretty close to where the La Quinta was. So we have market rate and then we have affordable housing. And we pulled the number of calls, and Kirkland Crossing actually had a higher number of calls for service than the affordable housing property. And when we looked at, okay, well, let's look at types of calls. So we drilled down and police were able to pull that information, and they actually had the same top 2 reasons for police response, which was assist and follow-up, which I had to understand what assist means, which I can tell you. So assist are things like child custody, noise complaints, residents requesting extra patrols, and assist requests by outside agencies. So for both properties, that represented just under half of all calls for 2024.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Okay, hi, I'm Katie Malik, and I'm running for City Council, and I have a question. You've spoken with the police, but have you talked with the fire department? Because I would anticipate that they're going to have a higher burden, especially the Houghton that was expanded a little bit, but not expand a great deal. And then also I'm wondering if you guys are working with the community hospitals that are going to be impacted, and what kind of, how you guys are going to be able to integrate all of those wraparound services in a community that's already struggling to get services at the community hospitals.
Yes, the fire department has been at every one of our Lynbrook meetings, I believe every one. So the fire department is intricately involved, and they're helping to design the plans for the overall structure of the facility. I don't know the answer to the hospital question.
The only thing I do just want to add is, so I want to back up the deputy on the difficulty breaking down the publicly tracked data. But from our own data on across our portfolio, the overwhelming majority of emergency response calls are medical. And that is largely due to the physical trauma of unsheltered homelessness, which I think folks can imagine, as well as other physical vulnerabilities like we talked about, possessing a disability, being older. And so we just really want to emphasize that, as I think Jim just said, a lot of the response call patterns to Plymouth buildings are very similar to those of nursing homes and assisted living facilities, of which our building is not. These are adults, independent adults. But we just want to really emphasize that the majority of emergency response calls are medical due to the complex medical needs of this population.
Okay, thank you. So next question. So does the city have plans to provide assistance to businesses that may, if there's a negative impact to the surrounding area?
So I think the spirit of this question is, are we going to subsidize if there's, am I reading that?
Well, I mean, obviously, even right now, there are extra expenses, right? So businesses are building more security measures, extra fencing, and so on. So there's already costs that are incurring that would not have been there prior. And that's going to be, obviously, manifest themselves in increased rents for leases and so on.
Yeah. Well, so we have set aside in our budget $1 million to work closely with the local business community surrounding the facility, and this is part of our Lynbrook meetings. And those monies are designed to make sure that the actual physical structure of the property is well landscaped, presents itself very well, it's very safe. It can go for all of the accoutrements that are necessary for safety, aesthetic benefit, community gardens, things that promote community. And in doing so, promote safety, because the more people are engaged and involved there, the more vibrant it becomes and the better off we feel the community will be. There's no revenue replacement program, if that's the question. I'm not quite sure I'm reading the question correctly.
I just wanted to make sure that if there are problems, there's help available for the businesses so they can stay in place and they can thrive.
Well, we provide services from the city, but we don't have those types of funds available to the city.
Thank you.
Do you mind if I jump in real quick?
Yes.
Sorry, Ken Oberman, I'm also running for Kirkland City Council. Just so happens. Question I have, I mean, the biggest discussion is around security. And from Plymouth, you've opened other facilities in the past. You know what's happened. You know the issues that you've seen. What are you doing to ensure, as this one opens, to ensure that extra protection, the security, the community feels safe? Because ultimately, there's going to be a period as you get this launch where it's going to be a little bit of chaos. It never goes off as you presented the slides. It never happens that way. And you have the experience in that. What is it?
So I think maybe a three-part answer to that. First and foremost, as we've noted, there is a safety and security plan that's in this agreement that we negotiated. And the safety and security plan involves people like Mike St. Jean and our police chief, Sherry Harris. They have to sign off on that. So there is what the police deem to be an appropriate structure by which how we're going to communicate and how we're going to respond. So at a very practical level, the Kirkland Police Department signs off on a safety and security plan. But I think also there is, in order to be secure, there has to be presence, like the city has to be there. One of the pieces of advice I got when this whole project started was put together a committee of residents, of local businesses, of community members, of all the city agencies, and make sure that people are meeting and being dynamic and anticipating that there's actually going to be a problem. If there is, you're already ready, you already have the relationships ready to be responsive to that problem. And the last thing I would say is just make sure that the referral networks are very integrated into who's actually in the community, because a lot of the secret sauce to this is about knowing your community, knowing who's there.
being connected to them. One of the suggestions I heard in this process was to pay case managers to stay with folks. When they move from shelters into permanent supportive housing, pay folks to stay so that they integrate better and that you learn if they're making it there or if they're not making it there. So a lot of it is starting with the police department, starting very much with a regimented plan that involves anticipated events that may happen, but also being very connected as a community.
Thank you, Jim. Just to the last question before we...
Very, very seriously, and we make that very clear. And so if that were to happen, we would respond with seriousness.
Since you take it... Okay, hold up. So we're going to do one last question, then we're going to open it up. Would you guys be willing to stay an extra 10 minutes? Okay, I'm sure. So, this last question we want to do, if you want to answer this last question, it's a 10-second answer. It's like a speed round, okay? And we want to open it up to this audience.
So basically, this is, are there specific quantifiable criteria in place that measures the success? For instance, whether somebody is stabilized, whether somebody has overcome addiction, whether somebody has been able to get job skills. So is there something that can be measured and that can be also published, obviously stripped of personal data, so that the community has an idea actually whether this facility is successful?
The fastest response is Healthier Housing publishes a dashboard. You can access it right now online. We also publish annual reports that has many of the metrics you're talking about. To your specific question about the chaos upon move-in, we've learned that it's actually best to stagger the amount of people that move in at any given time so that the building has a chance to establish a culture of safety and support. And so that actually mitigates a lot of the chaos that one might anticipate. The plan is to not move 100 people in 1 week into a building. That would be utter chaos.
So.
If it's speed round for measurable criteria for success, there's many things. We won't list them all, but one we will plug is lease up with local referrals. We want people who are experiencing homelessness on the east side to have the option to remain in their community. We know that most people tend to stick around where they were last housed, and for too long that has not been an option for people experiencing homelessness on the east side. And so that would be one metric of success for us.
And for the city, we have on page 7 and 8 of our agreement a report to the council in 6 months and then every year. And there are 12 very specific measures I can send to you if anyone's interested to get started with the type of data, including data on the results of the background screening, number of emergency responses and the like. So that would be part of the public process.
Okay. Question for Jim and also Sarah. Thank you first of all, you're hanging here to talk about what we are really worried and scared about this. So one of the questions I have for Sarah and Jen, you start with the chart with 35, 35, 30. That looks more like a goal. Because what I'm worried about is this, you're not going to have a facility kind of empty if you do not have enough 35% or 60% local. And also I want to ask Sarah, the experiences the other gentleman back there talked about data. Data is free you from everything else, emotion and all that stuff. I'm wondering, with the years of experience that you have in your organization, provide us with the sense that we should be trusting your organization and trusting the city. Because I really do not know if I can trust either one of you right now. Because the information you provided was, I'm not emotional, I'm going after data. And I'm a public health professional. I care for people, and this is extremely important. But the point of making the care plan, I'm looking at, you showed your facility. We are going to have 103 units in our neighborhood. Bellevue, double, triple size of us have 95, and Redmond has larger than us and have smaller. And then what are your experiences others? You need to provide, and the deputy chief was very political about this, but I want to tell you this. I love these guys, the work they do. The problem that I'm having, all those calls you're talking about, what you have internally, how are you going to provide those data and information to the community that would feel safe? I think that's the basis of us to ask for data. The more data you provide, the better we would feel. At this stage, I would not want that thing in our neighborhood. Not at all, because it doesn't serve anything that I see with the cost we are putting, money we are throwing into it. What is it going to be? And this measure, I'm not sure what we are going to measure it. How are you going to be successful with this if you cannot show us what in other neighborhoods or multiple years? You mentioned, Sarah, how many years you have been doing this, your organization? 45 years. You gotta have tons of data, because I'm an epidemiologist, right? Where are your data? Show us. Help us understand. Help the gentleman who have a business there worried about his people and the kids feel safe and understand what's going on. I know, Jane talked about City of Kirkland. We done some kind of they probably do more work if I want to go put a sewer in my neighborhood for permit that I have to do. I want to know how far are they going outside our city to get the data and information that you can get. And I'm not buying these things. They said, well, we cannot really find out how many service calls went through police and fire. That's to me hard. 45 years, you gotta have a pretty good number. Who is coming in, who is leaving, and all that stuff. If you provide this data, if you provide us really open and transparent data, I would be the first one to support you guys being in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? I do respect everybody, and I do respect all the time that you've given us. But the element of this whole project is you're taking something that has the potential, as well run as it is, to be very dangerous around children. Is that correct?
Yep.
Is that correct, everybody? So really, we're talking data and all that stuff, but the truth is, it's the location, and I don't know what the incentive was. But honestly, do you hear the hearts of parents? Do they hear the hearts of people? It's not that you're doing a bad thing, you're doing a very honorable thing. It's just the location is a problem, and nobody seems to want to stick to that issue. I'm just getting tired of hearing it for the few years that this has been going on. It's not safe where it is being planted, period.
Jim, you said earlier that you want to do for the community and that it's important what the community thinks. My question is, why was a meeting like this not done before the city purchased that property? And why is the city buying property without the community's support? This is the third project that I'm aware of that the city has bought, and I'm shaking my head. I'm like, why is the city buying property?
We didn't buy, the county purchased the property.
The county purchased the hotel.
But we all did.
He's still talking about the transparency before the.
Why were we not having meetings like this?
Public funds and all that.
Correct? Yeah, great, thank you, yes.
So the county purchased the property as part of their health through housing plan, and it's a purchase and sale agreement at the point of the negotiation, it's just not a public thing.
Doesn't the city have to give permission for it to be run?
Yes, we did. We did a near year-long process before we approved the county's ability to do it. The process after the purchase and sale agreement was a year-long public process. We had multiple town halls. And after the purchase and sale agreement, the city did do a significant public process before the council approved, and that was the document that I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. So it was about a year. Well, the city council had to approve it.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. My name is Lenny Bernardo. I've lived in Houghton for 25 years, just down the street. My question has to do with what is the drug policy? We're all concerned about safety, and I know you are too. But I think it would really be helpful to clarify what is the policy around drugs, and what procedures do you have in place to help people or minimize that, both from the point of view of the people that are housed as well as the people in the area. There's speculation that drugs might be a fairly prevalent issue with this population of people, and so I'd like some clarification around that policy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I know that's at the top of a lot of people's minds. I want to say that clean and sober housing works very well for some individuals, and there should be more of it. At the same time, clean and sober housing does not work for everyone, and it can be a barrier to maintaining housing for many people, which is why at Plymouth, we do not require sobriety as a condition of tenancy. In our experience, as a provider, building trust with residents is key to supporting their recovery goals, whatever those recovery goals may be. And that means being a non-judgmental space where residents can turn to even if they relapse or have a setback, which if anyone has ever known anyone with addiction knows that is very, very common, whether their housing is secure or not. I'd like to finish if I may, because this is a very important point, right?
I know, but it's the drug you're talking about. I have a quote in here from the organization that look at your sites and said investigation have uncovered incidents of drug use, overuse, and other criminal activity with certain Plymouth housing. I'm talking about data. You got to provide what are those.
Sir, we have that point. We're a little over scheduled, so I think if a little grace, just to allow her to answer the question. And, yeah.
There was a question about how we support our residents. So we take substance disorder strategies very seriously, and we have groups, peer navigators, contingency management, which is a program that helps people reduce their use, and community support activities for residents who want to participate, and for those who may choose to if or when they're ready. We make those very clear, very available, as accessible as whenever any person is ready to use them. And I did also want to make clear, in addition to how seriously we take our no weapons policy, we also take very seriously that we do not allow the sale of drugs on our property or within our buildings. We also take that incredibly seriously.
So I'd like to follow up on that. You've talked about how you have a code of conduct, and you've talked about how people who are choosing to be in your facility are choosing to be housed, and they're therefore choosing to abide by your code of conduct, because if they know that if they choose to break that code of conduct, then they're choosing to lose housing, or potentially so. But you also just talked about people not having to be sober and addiction, and we all know that people who are addicted are not in their right minds in a lot of instances, and the addiction is driving them, and so they're choosing to get their next fix, right? So they're choosing to do things that may be against the code of conduct. Same thing for people who have been deemed by a court of law to be incompetent to stand trial. That means that the court has found them incapable of understanding the difference between right and wrong. So how are they expected to be able to sign a lease where they are agreeing to abide by a code of conduct? Thank you.
I have a quick question. Can I? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
This is a longer conversation that we don't have time for tonight, but I want to emphasize that addiction is one of the biggest challenges of our time, and no country or government in the world has figured out how to eliminate addiction. It is an ongoing challenge that we all need to work on, but we do firmly believe that by creating community ties, by building trust, we get closer to it.
Okay, next question.
Just don't sell them.
Okay, my last question that I wanted to ask is was about the $1 million. So one of the things that we covered in the beginning of the meeting, this is for you, Jim, is that we're paving over our planted medians throughout the city with concrete, but yet we have $1 million to plant flowers and community gardens at this facility for King County. Shouldn't King County be paying for that? And shouldn't we use the $1 million to plant our medians in our city?
This money is specific for property, so it wouldn't be used in that way, but and the idea of creating a safe, vibrant area is a top priority for the city, so that's why the funding is there. But this isn't, as my understanding of the money, it's not fungible that way.
But you said you don't own the property.
We do not own the property.
Yeah, so why isn't King County paying for that?
Yeah, why would you send city dollars to beautify a property you don't own?
Well, we want to make sure that the project is safe and that the project is aesthetically pleasing and that we give it every opportunity to be a success.
Why don't you use that for the adjoining businesses and let King County pay for the facility?
Well, we're not paying for the facility, I appreciate that. We're paying for the beautification and safety of the physical surroundings of the building.
Within the property line.
Within the property lines.
That's my point.
Yeah.
So let King County do that and use the $1 million to help the businesses be safe around it.
Yeah, the money has to go to the property, as I understand it.
Yeah, but that's wrong, you guys voted for that.
Thank you.
Excuse me, is the city of Kirkland supporting House Bill 1195 that's being proposed that would allow you to put these permanent supportive housing in any residential neighborhood without notice?
I don't believe so.
Have we advocated against it?
I don't want to speak to our legislative group. You could follow along with the council adjudication of that. We make presentations every council meeting about that.
Would you be able to send that question?
Councilman Black, are you able to comment on that as the leader of the legislative committee?
Yeah, I don't think the city is supporting that.
Oh.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I know we could stay here for all night long. But I think some people have children and some people are tired themselves. I really appreciate everybody at the panel for showing up, facing tough questions. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the audience. And there's more to come after this one here, but I'm going to excuse the panel.